Once upon a time, in the days when divs and jinns and giants roamed the land, Mountains trembled and held its breath. Families prayed that the div would bypass their home, for they knew that if the div tapped on their roof, they would have to give it one child. The div would then toss the child into a sack, sling the sack over its shoulder, and go back the way it had come. No one would ever see the poor child again. And if a household refused, the div would take all of its children. So where did the div take the children to? To its fort, which sat atop a steep mountain. Do you know which rooftop received the div's dreaded tap? Upon hearing it, Baba Ayub let an agonized cry escape from his lips. The children wept with terror and also sorrow, because they knew that the loss of one among them was now assured. The family had until the next dawn to make its offering. Baba Ayub collected from just outside the house 5 rocks of identical size and shape. On the face of each, he scribbled the name of one child, and when he was done, he tossed the rocks into a burlap sack. When he offered the bag to his wife, she recoiled as though it held a venomous snake. "I can't do it," she said to her husband, shaking her head. "I cannot be the one to choose. I couldn't bear it." "Neither could I," Baba Ayub began to say, but he saw through the window that the sun was only moments away from peaking over the eastern hills. Time was running short. He gazed miserably at his 5 children. A finger had to be cut to save the hand. He shut his eyes and withdrew a rock from the sack. When he saw the name on it, he turned his face heavenward and let out a scream. With a broken heart, he lifted his youngest son into his arms, and Qais, who had blind trust in his father, happily wrapped his arms around Baba Ayub's neck. It wasn't until Baba Ayub deposited him outside the house and shut the door that the boy realized what was amiss. And there stood Baba Ayub, eyes squeezed shut, tears leaking from both, back against the door, as his beloved Qais pounded his small fists on it, crying for Baba to let him back in. And Baba Ayub stood there, muttering, "Forgive me, forgive me." For every day Baba Ayub did nothing but sit at the edge of his field, a lone, wretched figure, gazing toward the mountains. He stopped speaking to the villagers, for he believed they muttered things behind his back. They said he was a coward for willingly giving away his son, that he was an unfit father. A real father would have fought the div, and then one day he gave them proof. He rose at dawn. Without waking his wife and children, he stowed a few scraps of bread into a burlap sack, put on his shoes, tied his scythe around his waist, and set off. He walked for many, many days. He walked until the sun was a faint red glow in the distance. And some days he didn't eat at all, but still he walked, traveled across deserts and valleys and mountains. At last he reached the mountain atop which sat the div's fort. So eager he was to fulfill his quest that he didn't rest, and immediately began his climb, his clothes shredded, his feet bloodied, his hair caked with dust, but his resolve unshaken. Until at last he stood before the massive gates of the div's fort. "Who dares?" the div's voice boomed when Baba Ayub threw a stone at the gates. Baba Ayub stated his name. "I come from the village of Mountains," he said. "Do you have a wish to die? Surely you must, disturbing me in my home. What is your business? I have come here to kill you." There came a pause from the other side of the gates, and then the gates creaked open, and there stood the div, looming over Baba Ayub in all of its nightmarish glory. "Have you?" it said in a voice thick as thunder. "Indeed," Baba Ayub said. "One way or another, one of us dies today." It appeared for a moment that the Div would swipe Baba Ayub off the ground and finish him with a single bite of its dagger-sharp teeth. But something made the creature hesitate. It narrowed its eyes. Perhaps it was the craziness of the old man's words. Perhaps it was the man's appearance, the shredded garb, the bloodied face, the dust that coated him head to toe, the open sores on his skin. Or perhaps it was that, in the old man's eyes, the Div found not even a tinge of fear. "Where did you say you came from?" "Mountains Echoed," said Baba Ayub. "It must be far away, by the look of you, this Mountains Echoed. I could be granted a few last words before I am slain." "Very well," said Baba Ayub, "but only a few." "I thank you," the Div grinned. "May I ask what evil I have committed against you so as to warrant death?" "You took from me my youngest son," Baba Ayub replied. "He was in the world the dearest thing to me." The Div grunted. "I've taken many children from many fathers," it said. Baba Ayub angrily drew his scythe. "Then I shall exact revenge on their behalf as well." "I must say your courage rouses in me a surge of admiration." "You know nothing of courage," said Baba Ayub. "For courage, there must be something at stake. I'll come here with nothing to lose." "You have your life to lose," said the Div. "You already took that from me." The Div grunted again and studied Baba Ayub thoughtfully. After a time, it said, "Very well then. I will grant you your duel. But first, I ask that you follow me." "Be quick," Baba Ayub said. "Come closer," the Div motioned. Baba Ayub stood next to the Div. The Div pulled the curtains open. Behind it was a glass window. Through the window, Baba Ayub looked down on an enormous garden. Lines of cypress trees bordered the garden, the ground at their base filled with flowers of all colors. In 3 lifetimes, he could not have imagined a place so beautiful. But what truly brought Baba Ayub to his knees was the sight of children running and playing happily in the garden. They chased one another through the walkways and around trees. They played games of hide-and-seek behind the hedges. Baba Ayub's eyes searched among the children and at last found what he was looking for. There he was, his son, Qais, alive and more than well. He had grown in height and his hair was longer than Baba Ayub remembered. He wore a beautiful white shirt over handsome trousers. He laughed happily as he ran after a pair of comrades. "Qais," Baba Ayub whispered, his breath fogging the glass. And then he screamed his son's name. "He cannot hear you," the Div said, "nor see you." "I don't understand," Baba Ayub said. "I thought—" "This is your reward," the Div said. "Explain yourself," Baba Ayub exclaimed. "I forced upon you a test." "A test?" "A test of your love. It was a harsh challenge, I recognize, and its heavy toll upon you does not escape me. But you passed. This is your reward, and his. Your son does not remember you," the Div continued. "This is his life now, and you saw for yourself his happiness. Someday, when he is a man, he may choose to leave, and he shall be free to do so." The Div took the hourglass, flipped it over, and placed it at Baba Ayub's feet. "I will allow you to take him home with you," the Div said. "If you choose to, he can never return here. If you choose not to, you can never return here. When all the sand has poured, I will ask for your decision." And with that, the Div exited the chamber, leaving Baba Ayub with yet another painful choice to make. "I will take him home," Baba Ayub thought immediately. This was what he desired the most, with every fiber of his being. Hadn't he pictured this in 1,000 dreams? To hold little Qais again, to kiss his cheek, and feel the softness of his small hands in his own? And yet, if he took him home, what sort of life awaited Qais in Mountains Echoed? The hard life of a peasant, at best, like his own, and little more. That is, if Qais didn't die from the droughts, like so many of the village's children had. Could you forgive yourself then? Baba Ayub asked himself, knowing that you plucked him, for your own selfish reasons, from a life of luxury and opportunity. On the other hand, if he left Qais behind, how could he bear it, knowing that his boy was alive, to know his whereabouts and yet be forbidden to see him? How could he bear it? Baba Ayub wept. He grew so despondent that he lifted the hourglass where it crashed into 1,000 pieces. The Dev re-entered the room. Have you made your choice? Baba Ayub dried his tears, picked up his scythe, and tied it around his waist. He slowly walked toward the door, his head hung low. You are a good father, the Dev said, as Baba Ayub passed him by. Would that you roast in the fires of hell for what you've done to me, Baba Ayub said wearily. He exited the room and was heading down the hallway when the Dev called after him. Take this, the Dev said. The creature handed Baba Ayub a small glass flask containing a dark liquid. Drink this upon your journey home. Farewell. Baba Ayub took the flask and left without saying another word. Where did you go, Baba Ayub? What did you see? What happened to you? Baba Ayub couldn't answer them because he didn't recall what had happened to him. He remembered nothing of his voyage, of climbing the Dev's mountain, of speaking to the Dev, of the great palace or the big room with the curtains. It was as though he had woken from an already forgotten dream. He didn't remember the secret garden, the children, and most of all, he didn't remember seeing his son Qais playing among the trees with his friends. In fact, when someone mentioned Qais's name, Baba Ayub blinked with puzzlement. Who? He said. He didn't recall that he had ever had a son named Qais.